Golf was transformed 15, 20 years ago with some influential people who started to train quite heavy. They've had not good outcomes in their career.
Mm-hmm.
There were some who I've been associated with who were under that influence. They started to get sore backs and sore knees, and they realized in time that this isn't taking them to a place that they want to be, not only in terms of being pain-free, but it really didn't add length to their long shots. So I think people have to be honest with themselves and know what it is they need to be increasing both resilience and performance. So that's a start of that essay. But now the first theme that I think we developed is the spectrum of being human. And if I had I can't give you a blanket answer to that, but
I know you hate generalities.
Yeah, I can't do it. But if I was able to assess that person and determine what it is they needed, what is their current level of fitness? Do they have pain and an injury history? What is their body type for all of the anatomical, neurological, and physiological variables that we mentioned earlier? And then I say, all right, what is the thing that you need the most? And if it turns out that they need to store and recover elastic energy better to bore the ball in a long drive, then they ought to know the answer to that question. And if a deep squat or an Olympic lift will be the best tool, because an exercise is simply a tool to achieve a goal. Mm-hmm. So know the goal and choose the very best. So, and then someone listening to that will say, oh, McGill hates deadlifts and Olympic lifts. I've worked with the top. I'm not against it. I mean, one of the lovely things of Olympic lifting is it teaches pulse relaxation, pulse sequencing. Imagine an Olympic lift. The person, the lifter, gets into what's called a wedge, a lifter's wedge, mm-hmm. grips the bar, and rips it off the ground with a pulse. But it can't be a full-on maximum effort pulse because the muscles become so stiff you couldn't move. It is very much a incredible precision event. And then as the bar comes up, before they and the bar, gravity's pulling down the bar, so as soon as they get the bar up to about chest height, they finish off with the shrug, and then they have to completely relax to snap under the bar to get into a snatch catch of the bar. So you need a relaxation to get under the bar, because if there's residual stiffness, you won't make it. You'll lose the lift.
You're never going to get there.
And then you've got to snap to get under whether it's 50 pounds or 200 kilo. It's an incredible trick of neurology. How nuts do you have to be to relax as that bar is coming down on you? But you must, and then snatch it with even faster onset. So in that way, you could justify an Olympic lift as a tool for teaching pulse neurology that hopefully transfers to golf. But now I'm going to say that Olympic lifting isn't what everybody should aspire to. Olympic lifting is a sport that finds the athlete. The athlete doesn't find Olympic lifting. It's very, very different. So if you don't have mobile hips that you can hold a bar over your head so the thrust line is straight down through the shoulders, down through your hips, and down through your knees, your shoulders won't be able to create that thrust line. So where's it going to go? Probably into your back and your knees.
Yeah, and most golfers, the general public, we'll use them because that's probably the majority who's going to listen to this show, as they're sitting for 8-9 hours a day at their desk. They're driving, let's say, an hour to work each way, so there's 2 more hours. So now they're 10 hours a day. They go home, they eat dinner, they're sitting, there's another hour, 11, and they go watch TV in their soft sofa that's 12, 13 hours a day they're sitting, the kyphotic portion of the thoracic spine, and now you're going to tell them in the gym, even if it's just a big dowel rod, I want you lifting this over your head. Oh, and by the way, when you go practice golf, maybe an hour in the evening or an hour or so on the weekend, or you're going to play 4 hours, the default position is to be even more kyphotic as they bend over and get into the golf posture. And now you're going to put, whether it's a dowel rod, long dowel rod, you're going to have them practice these movements, or you're going to just, let's say, well, we'll start you easy. We'll just give you the bar at 45 pounds. They're never going to get their arms extended over their head,
right?
Because they're bent so forward. It's
so I
disaster.
will come out and say I don't recommend Olympic lifting as the tool of choice to enhance golf performance and resilience. But let's keep thinking along those lines. I have never seen a golfer do a squat on the golf course. I've never seen a hockey player, unless they're in a tussle on the ice, doing the same thing. But what we do see is incredible hip internal-external rotation. So the hip airplane exercise, which you're familiar with, standing on one leg, keeping the core somewhat controlled, the rib cage and pelvis stay together, and the you stand, say, on your left leg, your stance leg, your right leg is stiffened, straightened out behind you, which will greatly increase your balance, and then only through the hip, internally rotate and externally rotate throughout the full range of motion. There would be the beginning of a beautiful hip creaser that translates to golf. Now let's start putting some pulses into that. Let's start getting into what we would call a standing prayer, and quick off the mark, turn left and go, both sides. These are all pulsing drills that translate to golf because of the emphasis on internal and external rotation.
And that's using, in the video that you did with Lee, that's using hips to drive the swing and not spine-driven swings.
Right. It's a beautiful combination of creating a pulse that creates eventually the whip that you're trying to create through the linkage to the hands, to the golf club shaft. So these things have been thought through, and that to me would be a much more golf-specific, transferable tool of choice for training to enhance that with very little risk of crossing the tipping point. So Olympic lifting requires a lot of skill, and hence we've seen, I don't know of any pro golfers who are doing it at the moment. Maybe you do.
No, I don't know.
But it's now off.
But, and I look at those things, and for example, I was scrolling through social media, and there was I think it was the Korean Olympic team, a bunch of young guys. Maybe it was the teen Olympic team, I couldn't tell, but they're younger guys, and they're doing and they're not bulky. They're obviously well built. But what was fascinating to me about them, that got me thinking about this as we were talking when we were going to schedule this, was that they were goofing around in the gym, and they had the 45 and 90-pound plates stacked, and they were probably 4 feet high. I think they started, and they were going from a standstill. They'd squat down and jump up to the top. So the spring-like burst, the pulsing, I guess would be your terminology maybe in that effort, that they could jump that high, evidently because they've trained in Olympic style lifting. And I just ran through my head, like, these guys aren't too bulky and they have explosive power. Could that not be used for golf? But if the risk reward is not there, like the risk is too high for the reward that you're going to get.
Well, I don't know about that. So they're not lifting those plates in a deep squat. They are doing a pulse that is not out of a deep squat. It's a very modest squat.
But the training that I would have to imagine that they're training with deep squats, and all the other training they're doing makes that easier for them to jump up to a 4 foot, 5 foot high stack.
No, I would disagree.
Okay.
Because of my work with some of the best basketball dunkers and training the drill exactly as we're describing it. So the mechanics of that leap, it's not a deep squat leap at all. Now, It really depends, and you with your genetic background, you may appreciate this. I don't know. When you look at a long-legged MBA power forward who, when I sit down beside them, we're the same height. In other words, they have relatively shorter bodies and a longer leg length ratio. They don't do a deep squat. They do a beautiful pulse out of the gluteal muscles, which power the leap into the air. Very short range stiffness spring. It would be the analogy in engineering. There's very little power developed through the ankles. In fact, all I need is a linkage, a stick. But the power of the hips extend the hip, which in turn extend the knee. But they push the heel down into the ground. And when you measure a lot of them, watch them take off from the ground. And they're of course, there's a tiny little bit of push off on the ball of the foot, but the main thrust of the power is through the heel down into the ground. They land on the heel, and the bulk of the power production into the ground is through the heel. The push off through the ankle comes a little bit later, just as they're leaving the ground, for a tiny bit of added value. Now you take a basketball dunker who probably isn't as good a dunker, but they're longer in the body, shorter in the leg, and much heavier in the leg, heavier in the calf and whatnot. And their jump, it's much more of a vertical jump. The forward lean of the body doesn't change that much, but the knees come forward, and it is a leg strength pulse, vertical jump. And so that is a front squat style of strength expression. The longer leg is a hip hinge back squat style. Do you see the difference?
Yes.
And now you start putting some pulse production on
the
that.
mechanics of the physical
Very
structure,
different.
the
Yeah,
length of the femur,
yeah.
and the ball in the socket of the hip is going to play a role.
Right.
The
So
depth of the hip bend.
Olympic lifting favors a shorter leg, longer torso architecture.
And so golfers, if they're going to employ some of these things, if they want to add some strength, because let's say they want to go from playing once a week to 2-3 times a week, and they know that they haven't done any training, or they're minimally strong as far as overall body strength, and they want to be able to absorb the wear and tear. Maybe they're going to go with friends once a month and on a road trip, 6-7 hours, Pinehurst from here, 5-6 hour drive. They want to be able to absorb the travel and the more play. And if they employed some of these things, it would be very, very important for them to employ the right one based off of their physical biomechanic structure. Because if they employ the wrong one, they could unravel everything.
Yeah. So I'm not saying avoid squats, but maybe it's just a half squat or a quarter squat that is going to transfer to golf.
I think that's important, because I don't want people, again, going back to some people who are critics of you, that no, you're not an anti-deadlift, you're not an anti-squat, you're not an anti-Olympic lifter. Does it match what the person needs? Is it the medicine that they need?
That's all it is. Is it the best tool to accomplish the goal?
And then what form of that exercise are they using, and does it match their physical ability or physical build?
Right. So let's go back to the Korean leapers jumping up onto a stack of plates, or a box, basically. It's a box jump. Olympic lifters are very, very good at that. In fact, I have a metric being that you place the height of the box, the height of the athlete's nipples. And they have to jump with a very small counter jump, not a deep squat at all. They have to jump onto that box in an Olympic snatch catch position to even qualify to start training. And if you can't do that, starting with an Olympic lift is not the goal to create the pulse strength neurology that we're looking for. But now, again, I don't know how this stuff gets on the internet. I don't hate anything. I love it all. It's just, as you say, it's the match. So I say an athlete could do the metric test that I just described as a qualifier to start taking some weight with an Olympic bar. They've got the basic foundation now. I would like to see them leap up onto the box and land like a cat. I don't want to hear it. very quiet. So now they're demonstrating their ability to relax and they're honing it. Then I want to hear the opposite. I want to hear the foot plant, bam, on the box at the top. Now they've created the stiffened pulse that will then translate into an ability to catch the bar safely and athletically. So, you know,
that's
again,
amazing.
It's
the
all
subtleties in the training that makes such a big impact.
Yeah, I could go on for hours on how we're going to train that sequence to, again, create a resilient, sustainable athleticism. Is it for golfers? It wouldn't be my choice.